Hey guys, so today we're reacting to a video made by this guy. He's basically a guy that makes, I guess you could say political commentary. He's an American that lives in China, and so far as I know, all of his videos are in line with the official stance of the People's Republic of China, which is why I don't really, my impression is that it seems that he's basically a mouthpiece for the People's Republic of China. Most of his videos, if not all of his videos, would not go against the official stance of the People's Republic of China. So usually when I see one of his thumbnails, I'll brush it off, but I don't think he's ever talked about Taiwan. And so when I saw this thumbnail, which is really my space because my family is from Taiwan, I'm gonna talk about it. So I haven't seen it. Let's take a look.
Today, I'm going to just get right into it. I want to once and for all clearly spell out exactly why Taiwan isn't a country. And it's not because I feel like it isn't a country, it's because it literally isn't one.
Okay, so it depends on how you define a country, right? There are even people in Taiwan who, if we want to be like really specific and precise, the people who are more in line with the KMT, who identify as Chinese and not both Chinese and Taiwanese. So there's a spectrum in Taiwan. There's people who only identify as Taiwanese. There are those who identify as Chinese and Taiwanese, which is where I kind of fall in. And there are those who only identify as Chinese. Even though they might be born in Taiwan, it's just their belief that they are Chinese and that's it. And there's not really something called Taiwanese. There's a spectrum of people living in Taiwan. And so the people that I just talked about will say that there is no country called Taiwan. There is only the Republic of China. The country's name is the Republic of China. So just a disclaimer, there are people that might have been born and raised in Taiwan who will say that technically Taiwan isn't the country, but the government that governs Taiwan is the Republic of China, and that is the name of the country. Let's see what this guy has to say.
Taiwan, it's a beautiful island, but in the political context, when people say Taiwan, what they mean is the government called the Republic
Okay,
of China.
exactly what I just said. This is true. Traditionally Chinese, I guess, yeah, most of the island is now traditionally Chinese, but the Europeans tried to colonize it before the Chinese really did, whether it was the Spanish, the Portuguese, or the Dutch, and then the Japanese occupied it for 50 years. And we can't ignore the over a dozen tribes of Aboriginal peoples. So yeah, now most of the island, the official government in Taiwan is traditional Chinese. The most of the people on the island read and write Chinese.
History, including being partially or fully ruled by China, Japan, the Dutch Empire, the Spanish Empire, and even a short-lived Ming loyalist breakaway empire. But in the 1940s, change when the losing side of the Chinese Civil War retreated to Taiwan Island and began a nearly 40-year...
It's fair to say the losing side of Chinese Civil War, in all intents and purposes, they've mostly lost. Although, in all intents and purposes, the hot war, quote-unquote hot war of the Chinese Civil War has ended. Kind of. It's not a hot war anymore. It's kind of like a lukewarm war where it's like a stalemate kind of situation. But to say that the Chinese war has really like ended, it's kind of like North and South Korea. It's kind of like an awkward sort of lukewarm war, stalemate kind of situation.
Oppressive martial law. The right-wing nationalist ROC government lost the war, but they never technically surrendered, and that's when the confusion began.
That's why I said, like, when you say lost the war but never technically surrendered, how do you measure where that line sort of ends? Right? Like, doesn't a war end when somebody surrenders? So how can you say the war has ended? Like, the People's Republic of China, the Chinese Communist Party, has taken over most of the territory of China, like drastically. But if the Republic of China still exists, how could you say that the Chinese Civil War has ended? Like, if we look at the American Civil War, pretty sure the South, they surrendered and their official government, the Confederacy, ended with the Chinese or the American Civil War, right? That's not the case with the Chinese Civil War. So how do you say that it's ended? It's kind of like like I said, like a lukewarm war type of situation.
And it still persists to this day. People I've spoken to in the US and Europe tend to be understandably quite lost on the subject, so I want to clear it up today. First of all, there's only one China.
Okay, so that here is where it gets into, like, if we want to get into the weeds, this is where the debatable area is, right? Well, I don't even know if you can say that it's debatable. I personally like to say that there are two Chinas, just like how there are two Koreas. You have the authoritarian, communist, democratic People's Republic of Korea, which we all call North Korea, and then we have the actual democratic South Korea, which their official name is the Republic of Korea. So Taiwan's official name is the Republic of China, and they're the, obviously they're a democracy, and then you have the People's Republic of Korea, or God damn it, the People's Republic of China, which is, as we all know, when most people say China today, they think of the People's Republic of China. They think of the red flag with the 5 stars. Like I said before, they've drastically taken over most of the territory when it comes to China, right? They've gotten control of the mainland. And so it's easy to go, yeah, that's China, and that's it. End of story. But really, there's two Chinas. There's the Republic of China and there's the People's Republic of China. And that's where people from the mainland, I think, sometimes have a hard time wrapping their mind around. But let's continue.
There's always been only one China, even when China was divided into warring states.
That depends on how you define as China. Like,
that's because China is, traditionally speaking, not exactly the same as a country. It's always been more like a civilizational state, which for the sake of this conversation means it has always had regions, states, and provinces within it. And that's something that the PRC, or People's Republic of China, and the ROC, or Republic of China, both tend to agree on. Both of these governments claim the land area of China.
This is true. The Republic of China, they identify as Chinese. They believe in their idea of China. And I think in their fantasy, if they had a magic wand, they would be the China. The Republic of China would be the government that governs both Taiwan and mainland China. So both the Republic of China and the People's Republic of China both have their own beliefs about their own version of quote-unquote China.
The PRC generally claims all the current area of China, with some disputes along borders. The ROC generally claims all the same land, with different disputes along borders, plus all of Mongolia and parts of Russia. No, they also want Mongolia? Why not? Anyway, the answer to if the ROC or Taiwan is a country actually starts with these fundamental pieces of information. 1. As I mentioned, there is and always has been only one China. 2. In the modern context of what countries are, everyone agrees that China is a country. 3. There are multiple governments in China. For example, the Hong Kong local government and various other special administrative region governments. 4. There can only be one sole government of China. There cannot be two legitimate competing top-level governments. So the real question...
My question would be, what makes you think that and why? There can only be one top-level government of China. What makes you think that and why? So I think the road he's going to go down is that the People's Republic of China is the one and only top-level government of China, and the Republic of China is like a lower level of China. That doesn't really make sense because the Republic of China doesn't work, doesn't operate, and is not integrated within the People's Republic of China at all. They are literally two separate governments.
So the real question isn't about Taiwan or the Republic of China being a country. That's already been answered. It's not a country. The country is China. What people actually mean when they tell you Taiwan is a country is either that the ROC is the sole government of China, or that the ROC and the land they control is a separate country than China.
I don't think anybody really argues that the Republic of China, the ROC, is the sole government of China. Like, who would argue that? The PRC exists. The People's Republic of China exists. So how could the ROC be the sole government of China? It's not. The ROC and the land that it controls is a separate country, but the Republic of China still recognizes and identifies itself as China.
Those are the two claims, which are actually quite different than each other. And usually
these are not the two claims. The claim that I just laid out is a claim that you are ignoring.
people who make those claims haven't thought enough about the subject to even realize how different these two claims are. But it doesn't really matter because neither of them are true.
Did he just change what he originally said? He originally said the first claim is that the ROC is the sole government of China. And now he's saying that the ROC is the government of China. That's two different claims. The ROC identifies as the government of a China that they identify with, but they don't deny that there is another government that also shares the same claim. They don't think that they are the sole government of China.
Taiwan's ROC is the government of China. It's not a different country. It literally is China. And the other claim is that Taiwan's ROC and the land it currently controls is a separate country.
So this is where he's wrong. These are not the two separate claims. So I feel like he's debating a straw man here. It's a straw man fallacy. People do claim that the ROC is a separate country than the PRC. But people who identify with the ROC don't think that they are the sole government of China because the PRC exists and nobody denies the PRC exists.
In China, this will be called a breakaway state. Let's examine. First, we need to define what's meant by the word country. According to this definition, a country is any place or group of people that is being controlled, whether or not it's sovereign, even if it's part of another state. So Microsoft is a country, Dallas is a country inside another another country called Dallas County, which is inside another country called the United States of America. Disneyland is a country. These are completely valid countries by that definition. But obviously, no one uses such a vague definition in this context. No one means that when they use the word country. So what do people mean when they say country? A country is a sovereign state. But what does that mean? What is a state, and what exactly is sovereignty? A state in this context is any political body. Hong Kong is a state in the general sense. Taiwan is a state in this general sense. So is China itself and California. But Microsoft isn't, and neither is Disneyland. Sorry, a state is a political government of people and or land. It does not make any difference if it's legitimate, legal, temporary, or anything else like that. Being a state is not the same thing as being a country. Not at all. A country is, again, a sovereign state. Sovereignty is a little more complicated. There are two unequal types of state sovereignty: de facto and de jure. De facto sovereignty means you have actual current governance of the people and or the land. You have the armies, the legal system in place, the passports, that kind of thing. De jure sovereignty means you have the official, internationally recognized right to govern the people and or land.
Okay, so the Republic of China is a de facto, would fall under the de facto type of sovereignty. And under de jure, some countries recognize the Republic of China. Not all. Most countries don't because of politics and the PRC's influence, and that includes the United Nations. But some countries do recognize the Republic of China.
In order to be fully uncontroversially considered a country, you must have the majority of both of these things.
So I see what he's going to do. He's going to say, under de jure, the Republic of China doesn't have the majority of countries around the world's recognition, and therefore the Republic of China is not a country. So it really just depends on your definition of a country.
But if there's a conflict, disagreement, or competing claims, the most important factor by far is de jure. De jure sovereignty is the legal right. It's so important that sometimes you only need de jure sovereignty to be considered a country. The majority of China is actually, or de facto.
So this is where I would disagree. Just because something is legal doesn't mean that it is right. It was legal for men to be the only gender to be able to vote. It was legal to have slaves. That doesn't make it right.
The majority of China is actually, or de facto, governed by the People's Republic of China.
This is true.
Like I mentioned, the ROC claims the same land, so we cannot use de facto governance to determine who is the actual government. Some regions within China do have a level of their own de facto sovereignty. For example, Hong Kong has its own passports, police, government, laws, currency.
Sure, but the government of Hong Kong doesn't claim anywhere else outside of Hong Kong. The government of Hong Kong doesn't claim to be the sole and legitimate government of all of China. It only governs itself, and it only identifies as the government of Hong Kong.
All that stuff. It has at least some level of de facto sovereignty. That doesn't change the fact that the one single officially internationally recognized country of China has one primary de facto government called the People's Republic of China. But again, just having that de facto governance doesn't make China a country, nor does it make the PRC the real government of China. There are many states in the world with de facto sovereignty, and yet we don't call them countries. We don't call them countries without de jure sovereignty. That's the legal, officially recognized right to sovereignty. And again, a state generally needs to have the majority of de facto and de jure sovereignty to be considered a country. If there's a dispute, then the one which has international recognition has the rights. But where does this de jure sovereignty come from? In the modern international world, starting a little after World War II, it comes from official international recognition. It doesn't come from non-recognition. It doesn't come from secret recognition. It doesn't come from unofficial recognition. It comes and only comes from the official recognition by other countries. There are two main theories on how a state can obtain sovereignty, only one of which is relevant to us, but I will still point out the other. The constitutive theory basically requires only that a state is officially recognized by a country as being a country. In the case of conflicting claims, the state which has the most other countries' official recognition.
So this is where I would disagree. I'm not disagreeing that this might be the case, but I'm disagreeing that this is what it should be. It's a appeal to majority fallacy. Just because most number of people recognizes something, or thinks something, or claims something, doesn't make it true. In certain societies, most people thought that the earth was flat. Doesn't make it true. In certain societies, most people thought that all the other planets revolved around Earth, including the sun. Doesn't make it true. Just because the majority of a people or the majority of countries think something doesn't make it true. You can't make something true just by thinking it.
Would be the de jure sovereign state. The state which has the majority in China is, again, the People's Republic of China. So according to the constitutive theory, the ROC is not the government of China, the PRC is. And China itself is not the Republic of China, but is the People's Republic of China. The declarative theory is a bit different. It seeks only to define which are de facto states. It makes no attempt at describing de jure states, but I do have to mention it so I don't get a million comments about it. It asserts that any state which has a permanent population, a defined territory, a government, and capacity to enter into relations with other states is itself a state, a de facto state. Hong Kong is a de facto state by this theory.
Sure, but again, the government of Hong Kong doesn't and has never claimed to be the government of all of China.
So is the ROC. But again, we've already established that the ROC is a state. The question is it a country? Does it have de jure sovereignty over itself or all of China? The answer is still no. The declarative theory is irrelevant because it has nothing to do with official legal recognition.
The reason why I, especially in this case, don't care for this de jure sovereignty is because they will use this and legitimize the People's Republic of China's claim over Taiwan. Fact, the People's Republic of China has never governed Taiwan before. They feel entitled to it, but they have no right to it.
Since 1971, the vast, overwhelming majority of countries not only officially recognize the PRC as the government of China, they specifically recognize them as the only legitimate representatives of China.
Okay, so this guy is really just making an appeal to popularity and an appeal to majority. And I'm going to repeat myself, just because a majority of people think something doesn't make it true. And you have to remember, so when he brings up since 1971, it's funny how he doesn't talk about what happened before 1971. Because prior to 1971, the Republic of China was de jure was officially recognized as the legitimate government of China. So why are you neglecting to bring that up?
Just since I first came to China in 2012, 6 more countries dropped support for the ROC. Since I've been making videos in the last 2 years.
So it's good that this guy has no problem recognizing that there are countries that officially recognize the Republic of China. But the problem I see is that his definition of a country would be fluid depending on how many countries recognizes the government. And that could sway left and right, up and down, back and forth, depending on politics. What doesn't change back and forth, the constant that he has yet to acknowledge is that the People's Republic of China has never governed Taiwan before. It has never happened before.
There's 3 more countries drop support for the ROC. So not only is the ROC officially recognized by almost no countries in the world, that number is rapidly declining. Meanwhile, the overwhelming recognition of the PRC as the one and only government of China continues to grow. So what have we learned? 1. China is a single country. We know it's a country because the overwhelming majority of countries in the world recognize it as such. 2. The PRC has the vast majority of the entire world officially recognizing it as the only legitimate representative of China, and that number continues to grow. 3. Taiwan has the vast minority of the entire world officially recognizing it, and that number continues to dwindle. And we know that even if China were 2 countries, the island of Taiwan and all the regions controlled by the ROC would still be part of the first China.
The first China being the Republic of China, because the Republic of China existed before the People's Republic of China.
Now, the ROC will need to find their own land somewhere else to build whatever state they want to build. So that demolishes the first claim that the ROC is the rightful government of China. That's debunked. But what about the second claim? That the ROC and the land it de facto controls is not part of China. That it's a totally different country altogether. Again, there needs to be official international recognition that the area isn't part of China. Even if we took the
problem that I have with what he's saying is that he's conflating China with the People's Republic of China. Again, the People's Republic of China has never governed Taiwan before. They want to, they feel entitled to it, but just because you want to control someone doesn't give you the right to, especially if they don't want you to.
Vast minority of countries who officially recognize the ROC as evidence that they are recognizing it as a separate country, which isn't necessarily the case. But even if we do assume that, it still would not be even close to enough to make it true. There just is literally no chance at all that the ROC will ever legally become a separate country. And again, it's not even becoming more likely. It's becoming less likely as the few remaining countries that do officially recognize the ROC are dropping off. But wait, I know what some people are thinking. All this talk about official recognition is a trick. Taiwan has unofficial recognition from dozens of countries. We got you, Nathan. First of all, unofficial recognition is not what makes de jure sovereignty. Only official recognition does. But
he's treating this de jure sovereignty as kind of like a golden rule, which I've already talked about. Just because a majority thinks something doesn't make it so. He's talking about what the current state of affairs is, but completely neglecting what should be. And he's completely not talking about why those countries are dropping recognition. And he is neglecting to mention that the Republic of China did have majority recognition before 1971. Let's think about why he's neglecting these things.
Even if unofficial recognition did somehow magically equate to official recognition, and even if we combined all the unofficial and official recognition Taiwan has in the entire world, not only would it still not have even close to a majority of the world, it also wouldn't have even close to the PRC's official recognition. You get it? Even if I grant you the most lenient, wide open, charitable use of data possible, and sway all the data in your favor, all of that combined still isn't even close to Taiwan being a country of its own, nor of the ROC being the government of China. It's just not even close, guys, no matter how some people might feel about it. This is why China fights back when any other country tries to sell arms to Taiwan. It absolutely is a violation.
Okay, so if he's choosing to conflate China with the People's Republic of China, this is not a violation of China's sovereignty, because the People's Republic of China only governs the mainland, and I think maybe a couple of islands off its shores. Selling arms to Taiwan doesn't affect the People's Republic of China's jurisdiction. It does not have any right to demand that it stops, because the People's Republic of China does not govern Taiwan. So you're demanding, it's like Taiwan is outside the jurisdiction of the People's Republic of China. So it would be like if you have 3 friends and somebody's selling candy to another friend, person A has no right to demand that person B stops selling candy to person C. Person A has no right, no business in controlling person C.
If we care at all about international standards and international law, Taiwan isn't its own country, nor is the ROC the government of...
I wonder if he's being intentionally misleading. I wonder if his being misleading is intentional, or if he genuinely isn't trying to be misleading. The ROC is no longer the government that governs mainland China, but it is the government that governs Taiwan, completely independent of the People's Republic of China. So he's kind of confusing the 2 claims that he claims is the only 2 claims, which is not the case. Taiwan is governed by the Republic of China, and there can only be one top-level government in China. Why? What is your basis for that claim? You could say that there can only be one top-level government in a country. What he's trying to do is say, okay, both the ROC and the PRC claims Taiwan as their territory, but he's trying to delegitimize the ROC, and therefore, if the ROC is delegitimized, then Taiwan is a part of the PRC. I don't know if he's intentionally doing this trick or what is going on, because I don't want to assume his motives. I don't want to pretend I know what's truly inside his heart and his head, but Anyway.
There really is only one top-level government of China, the People's
This is true. The People's Republic of China is the, let's use his words, the top-level government that governs mainland. That's fine, right? They won the hot war. In the physical world, they have controlled the mainland of China, but that doesn't give them a right to control, to invade, or to annex Taiwan.
There are activists, separatists.
Okay, so you can't use the word separatists here because Taiwan has never been under the jurisdiction of the People's Republic of China. So therefore, Taiwan is not separating from the People's Republic of China because Taiwan has never ever been under the jurisdiction of the People's Republic of China.
Secessionists, whoever. There are always people with differing opinions, but when you ignore everyone's feelings and just look at the facts of the case, it's actually surprisingly clear. Taiwan is not.
And there are many facts of the case that I talked about that you have neglected to mention. So maybe you can do that for your next video. All in all, yeah, like it's something to note that his videos and his opinions and his stances will never go against the official stances or desires of the People's Republic of China. That's one thing that you should keep in mind. I don't know if he has ever accepted a debate before, but I think he's probably one of those channels that will probably just, he seems like one of those channels that will only post their opinions and essentially only have their own monologue as opposed to having a dialogue. Those are my thoughts on the matter. Feel free to comment your questions and opinions. There is another channel, I think, that goes by the name Laowai86. He has made a video responding to this called Taiwan is a country, even if you wish it isn't. So I'm going to be taking a look at that. I'll link it down below so you guys can watch it. I haven't seen it yet, but I look forward to. And that will be it for today. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.